encountered, and this was the guy he was supposed to fleece. It doesn't matter, he told himself. As long as he doesn't suspect anything, it's not a problem. Breck reached to shake Reef's hand like they were old friends. Reef yanked his goggles off his neck instead and handed them over. "Oh, right, we're getting started?" Breck tugged at a zipper on his form-fitting raincoat and produced his own pair of goggles. "Careful now. New model." Reef pulled the goggles over his head and gave Edric a quick glance. Edric's usually blank face was full of loathing for Breck. He turned to say something to his alien friend on his other side. "Ollie will be the tank." Reef pointed back to where Ollie was loading himself up with imaginary armor. "Breck, you hang back and do far-ranged attacks. If anything zeroes in on you, get close to Ollie so he can take the damage." Right, Breck said, wiggling Reef's goggles into place over his eyes. "We'll all get ourselves to Canada in no time." He flashed another smile that made his cheeks bulge under the weighty goggles. Reef bottled his rage. "Save it for the dungeon, where you'll need it," he told himself. "I've got an impervious elixir in my inventory," he told Breck. "You might want to drink it now." Ollie led the way through the opening in the razor wire to a pair of battered metal doors. A heavy chain dangled from one handle, its busted padlock lying in the grass below. Breck pushed his way to the doors and let himself in first. Edric's gaze lingered on the padlock. "Think he slept with her?" he asked Reef. The hatred in his eyes unsettled Reef. He was about to answer no when a wave of uncertainty hit him. Breck had visas. He lived on the floating isle. Why wouldn't Cadence sleep with him before sleeping with a guy whose house wasn't even big enough to stand up in? A new brand of hatred formed in Reef's heart. Inside, Breck was testing Reef's new sword, swinging it through the empty air. "Don't forget," Edric said. "Breck makes the kill. Reef picks up the silver scepter." Reef scrutinized him, wondering at the desperation in his voice, but the next moment their goggles flashed to life. Leafy vines wrapped themselves around the steam plant's huge concrete beams and rickety metal ladders. Flame-colored flowers and fronded trees exploded through every opening in the levels overlooking the main warehouse. The towering white turbines, barely visible in the moonlight, were transformed into enormous hives, shuddering with some inner turmoil. "I don't think we want to get too close to the dragon nests," Ollie warned, staring up at the hives. The sudden barrage of images left Reef's head spinning. "Get a hold of yourself," he thought. His breathing had gone erratic. A warm, dizzying sensation spread through his chest and out to his limbs, courtesy of the resin now going bland in his mouth. For a moment, he felt pinned in by the chest-high plants projected by his goggles. He batted aside a spreading branch to find a grimy control bank that shouldn't show while he was wearing his goggles. It was part of the steam plant, not the game world of Alt. Bad design or patchy edit, he wondered. He didn't have long to think about it. A swarm of fairies came ripping through the leaves, engorged with foul nectar that they spewed over the concrete floor. The effect from Reef's goggles was to make the floor steam, as though it were being eaten by acid. "Watch your step!" someone called, and the voice rang in Reef's ears. He took a steadying breath and forced his mind to focus on the game. Night hares came next, tall as Reef's knee and bearing long tusks for teeth. Reef blinded them with a flash spell, and the rest of the group used various mage blades and long swords to dispatch the creatures. Ollie snatched up the shield spell the hares had dropped, and then led the way up a clanging metal staircase to where the plants were jungle-thick and blooming with tentacle-like flowers. Just as Reef was wondering if the enormous blossoms were duplicated from the other place, or if they were from some game designer's imagination, One of them locked onto his leg with its finger-like tendrils. He hacked at it with a dagger, while a mage made his entrance with a swarm of toads swollen to the size of dogs. "Hang back!" he shouted to Breck. "Let Ollie take the damage." Breck made some useless gestures with his electronic glove and threw out spells that fizzled in midair. One of the toads stretched its blue-black tongue and came back with the crystal dagger that had been strapped to Breck's arm. Reef's crystal dagger. "I said stay back!" Reef cried in frustration. He groaned at the memory of what he'd gone through to get that dagger, defeated a dark elf, and then assembled the 24 materials required to turn its fang into a blade. "Sorry, really sorry," Breck called, and made another attempt at a spell that was too difficult for him. Edric's alien friend, playing as a light elf, got busy casting healing spells on Ollie while the mage attacked. Reef's goggles created the illusion that veins of magic flowed through the alien's skin, and Reef thought to himself that he'd never seen an alien look so alien before. The mage finally crumpled, and they were off to find the stairway to the next level. Reef hung back. Now was his chance to get the visa off Breck's account. He rifled through Breck's hard drive until he found it, reached for the disk zippered into his jacket pocket. A flash of white showed against dark green leaves. Reef froze. That was no night hare. He plunged into the bushes. Another white flash. Reef brought down the flat of his sword, pinning the white rabbit against the floor. He felt like shouting. He'd done it. Finally. He yanked the rabbit up by the ears. This was it. One free help was his. If only white rabbits gave out visas, he thought grimly. He considered asking for a queen's mark and gifting it to his own account so he could get into the palace on the harbor. But what good would that do him if he was going to Canada? And there was still that question that haunted him. Who made up the quest for the fated blade? He asked the rabbit. Somewhere in the distance the others were clanging their way up to another floor. Ollie would kill him if he knew he was hanging back for this. What's the username? The rabbit remained silent for a moment, as if considering how to answer. Then it said, "Would you want me to warn you if you were walking into a trap? Should I, if it means harm to me?" Reef tried to shake the haze out of his brain. Was his mind playing tricks on him? "What would you do in my place?" the rabbit went on. Cold dread seeped into Reef's stomach. "What are you talking about? What's the fated blade?" "Do you want to know about fate? You joined your world to another's without thought of what dangers might come. And now the connection between the worlds will be severed. It must be." More confusion, and then clarity. Reef checked the bottom of his display and confirmed that the chat channel was open. The white rabbit wasn't a real white rabbit at all, but was someone talking to him through a digital pet. "Who is this?" He already knew. He whipped around, looking for some sign of Edric's alien friend. Only black leaves and riotous blossoms. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I'm trying to warn you. Are you listening? You have walked into a trap." "What trap?" Reef said to the rabbit. The chat channel closed. The rabbit vanished from Reef's grip. "What you doing?" Breck said from the bushes. Reef spun to face him. White rabbit." Breck couldn't have heard anything the rabbit had said. Its voice had come through the chat channel directly to Reef. "Found it a second ago. Gone now." "I heard you say something to it about the fated blade. Said you thought it was a trap?" He pulled up his goggles, and their light flashed on a metal bracelet around his wrist. It's not a real quest. Just the Chinese mocking us. What? Reef's eyes were glued on the bracelet. No doubt it had Cadence's name engraved on it. You know the game is riddled with leeches, all waiting for their creator to say the word, and... Breck mimed an explosion with his hands, made a noise with his cheeks puffed out. Down goes all our infrastructure. The leeches are waiting for the signal. The signal, the attack, that's the fated blade. Reef squinted at him. His head was filling with fog again. Think about the character who offers that quest, Breck went on. Ever notice the color of his clothes? Red with yellow stars, same as Great China's flag. A vague memory came to Reef of the man outside the hotel that served as the immigration office. A battered leather vest like a second hide, red sleeves showing underneath. I read about it on this forum. Breck grinned that harmless grin Reef was coming to despise. You read forums? There's a lot of tips that can help you level up. Well, I guess you don't need that. He shook his wrist, fidgeting with the metal bracelet that must still feel foreign to him. The movement dislodged something in Reef's brain. You met Cadence. How, again? He asked Breck. Edric introduced us. I met him on the floating isle. Reef's mind went back to what Edric had said earlier that day. Don't you think I've been working on getting visas for a long time now? Edric had introduced Breck to Cadence on purpose, because he knew Breck had visas, or could at least get some. He had set up Breck from the beginning. Reef almost laughed. Edric was even more of a snake than he had thought. Then his skin went cold. What else isn't Edric telling me? From above, Ollie's voice rang out. Where are they? Better go help, Breck said. Reef followed him. He felt suddenly jumpy. The shadowed plants seemed ominous. What had he gotten himself into with Edric? And what was Edric planning? As he clanged up the stairs, he remembered he hadn't yet taken the visa from Breck's hard drive. He quickly located it and fumbled for the disk Edric had given him. On second thought, he left the disk in his pocket and instead sent the visa through the chat channel to his own goggles, the ones Breck was wearing. Breck jolted to a stop at the top of the stairs. I got a transmission on your goggles, he said, turning toward Reef. Let me check it. No, Reef said, a little too forcefully. No, it sounds like they need us. Look, I can see them over there. Breck whirled around, sword in hand. Transmission forgotten. He and Reef scrambled through the foliage to where a huge beast was wreaking havoc, a hulking black mass of bristles. 6-foot spikes protruded from its back, thick needles from its arms and legs. Its glinting black eyes, clustered like a spider's, were almost lost in the nest of bristles covering its face. It chased them down a rusted catwalk that felt like it would give way any moment. Ollie drew it down to the main floor, where there was space to get at it with swords. That's you, Breck! Reef shouted. Make the kill, and I'll grab the scepter the bristle beast drops. A bank of dials on the wall came to life, needles pulsing frantically. The white dragon hives towering over them began to hum. For one terrified moment, Reef wasn't sure if it was all part of the game, or if the old turbines had come back to life. He ripped off his goggles to find the turbines still and silent in the moonlight. The dials on the walls were rusted over, dead. Reef, what are you doing? Ollie shouted. Put your goggles on! Reef jerked them back over his eyes to find a chaotic scene. Breck was doing clumsy battle with the wounded bristle beast, who was trailing sticky purple blood. The hives had broken open, and dragon fledglings were shooting out, thin and whip-like and enraged. They circled overhead, dipping uncertainly as they flew with their new wings, shrieking like banshees, blinking blind white eyes. Reef shot out spells like crazy, pulling blindly from Breck's inventory. The alien was doing the same, but with fluid motions that suggested he faced dragon hordes every day. Ollie had pulled out a crossbow. Edric was nowhere to be seen. Until he was at Reef's back, hissing, "The disc!" Reef passed it to him with one hand while dealing damage with the other. Edric pocketed it, turned to go. Reef thought, "That's it. It's done. He won't know it's blank until it's too late." But then Edric stopped, jerked on Reef's arm so that a spell slammed into the concrete beams overhead and fizzled out. "You pick up the scepter," Edric said. Then he slipped away, the blank disc in his pocket. Reef's heart slid back out of his throat. "Where's Edric going?" Breck shouted, still fending off the bristle beast's attacks with Reef's sword. "Just get the beast!" Reef shouted back. He was desperate now to have this all over, so he could get his goggles back and get away before Edric came looking for him. Edric could be stopping even now, checking the disc, finding it blank. "Alls, help him!" "No, I want to make the kill myself!" Breck cried. Ollie was busy with the dragons anyway. They dove at him with snapping jaws while he aimed with his crossbow. His armor was scorched and battered. Reef knew he should stay and help, but he ran to Breck instead. The drug had taken its full effect now. Reef took in too many things at once. The whip of wind from dragon wings, the vines that furred every surface, the slippery feel of bristle beast blood under his shoes. The blood. He hated that most of all. The steam plant smell of rust and old steam was like the metallic smell of it, and he had to fight off visions of black oil on white sheets. He searched Breck's inventory for the strongest spell he had. The bristle beast aimed a spiky paw at Breck, ready to knock away his sword. Reef sent a bolt of crackling blue magic at the cluster of eyes buried in the bristled face. The monster howled with pain. Breck drove the sword home. A fountain of purple blood spurted out, and the beast dissipated. Reef's jerking vision took in the sight twice. The beast vanished. It flickered back into existence. It vanished again. In its place, the silver scepter gleamed, clean and bright, against the vanishing blood, and banded with cold, clear sapphires. Reef stepped to retrieve it. "Reef, wait!" Ollie called. And at the same time, Breck said, No! Your sword, your treasure!" He jumped forward and closed his hand around the treasure, and then three things happened at once. Ollie shouted, "No!" Reef realized that it hadn't been some effect of the drug that had made him see the bristle beast vanish twice. And Breck jerked his head back, as though Reef's goggles had given him a mighty zap. "What happened? What's going on?" Reef asked him. Breck clutched at the edges of the goggles. "Oh shit! Oh shit!" "What?" Reef cried. "It's a leech!" Ollie called. "Didn't you see the edit?" "It's not a leech," Breck said. Reef ripped the goggles off Breck's head and shoved them down over his own eyes. He had just enough time to see his screen scrambled into a mess of random pixels before the display went dark. "It was a virus," Breck said. "Not a leech. A virus." Reef felt cold cement slam against his knees. Everything was dark. He pulled off his goggles to see he had fallen. A virus. A virus from the scepter had wiped his hard drive. Edric must have planted it, hoping that it would wipe Breck's hard drive. But Breck hadn't stuck to the plan. Breck had grabbed the scepter, while wearing Reef's goggles. And now everything stored on Reef's hard drive was gone. "Why did you pick up the scepter?" Reef's voice was shrill. It didn't sound like his voice at all. "I was supposed to pick it up. It was supposed to go to your account." "Cadence told me I should let it go to your account," Breck said. "She said you deserved it since it was your sword I was going to make the kill with." Cadence? Since when did Cadence have any part in this? Confusion pounded in Reef's head. "She said—" "When did she say that?" "I told her about the dungeon we were all going to do together. I told her Edric had set it up so I'd get the scepter on my account. But she said you should have it." She said... The euphoria of the drug had passed, and now there was only the feeling of lead settling into Reef's veins, into his bones. "Reef?" Ollie said. Reef pulled off Breck's goggles and flung them away. His own goggles lay dark and empty on the floor. "Everything on my hard drive's gone. Wiped." He caught a movement in the corner of his vision, the alien pulling off his own goggles, his face a blank mask. Reef waited for him to say something, but he only turned and walked away, headed for the doors at the end of the warehouse. "We have to get out of here," Reef groaned, "before Edric comes back." "Edric?" Breck rocked on his feet, confused, nervous. "He set us all up," Reef said. "It didn't work the way he planned, but he set us up. Your visa's gone." Reef's feet pounded an uneven rhythm on the pavement. He found himself at Cadence's apartment building, and then thumping up the stairs, his heart thumping to match. Her door was unlocked, but she was gone. No one in the apartment. Just as he left the building, he saw Edric coming around the corner. Reef ran even while his muscles trembled in protest. Back to his container. She wasn't there. Something was piled on the bed. He flicked on the light. The something was a mound of gray bricks of resin. On top of the pile lay a note. Reef snatched it up, and then backed away again, as though afraid the bricks would come to life under his fingers. Cadence had scrawled, "Sell it. Croy doesn't need it anymore." Reef leaned against the wall, trying to understand what it meant, trying to resist the itch in his bones at the sight of the drug. The night in the light-up lounge came back to him. He had asked her if she was close to getting the visas, and she had given him a strange answer. "You know why the aliens stopped wearing those red bracelets? Everyone wanted something from them." What had she meant? That she was sorry she wanted something from Reef? Money? Visas? Or that she was sorry Reef wanted something from her? But I didn't want anything from her, Reef thought. Not even the money in the end. I only wanted to be with her. And now she was gone, and had left all of this resin behind for him. Why? To make up for the virus that had wiped his hard drive? Because she hadn't known that Edric had planted a virus in the Silver Scepter, a virus meant for Breck. She hadn't known it would wipe Reef's hard drive. Had she? He looked at the bricks piled on his bed. Sell it. He pulled on his goggles and coaxed them to life. His system latched on to a wireless connection and spent a minute setting itself up from scratch. He opened the chat channel and tried hailing Cadence, but she wouldn't answer. He pulled them off again. She'd known about the virus. She had wanted it to wipe his hard drive. Why? Why would she want to do that to him? Because she didn't want another husband. She'd only wanted the visas. He didn't think, just loaded his pockets with as many bricks as he could and left his container. Edric would be looking for him, thinking he still had Breck's visa. He had to leave. He didn't know where to go. He headed to the lounge she'd taken him to. If she was waiting for him somewhere, that would be the place. But that was stupid. Why would she be waiting for him? She was probably all the way to Canada by now. He wasn't the only one on the street, even late as it was. A knife flicked open behind him, a familiar sound that nevertheless sent a fresh surge of adrenaline through his veins. He turned just in time to avoid a swipe from the blade of a pale-faced junkie. Reef tore a brick of resin from his pocket, flung it as far as he could, and ran in the other direction. He was breathless and shaking with exhaustion by the time he reached the gray-painted door next to the noodle place. He pounded on the door. No answer. He leaned his back against it, tried to catch his breath. Then the dark unsettled him, and he crossed over to the other side of the street. The neon sign over the Roosevelt Hotel was like a beacon. A ping from his goggles told him someone was hailing him on the chat channel. It was Cadence. Her voice came through, but not her face. "I'm sorry." Reef bit back his anger. "My entire hard drive is wiped." "I wish Edric weren't so good at doing things like that. I only wanted to get rid of the visa. I knew you would have it." Reef pressed his fingers against his temples. Anger boiled in his stomach, no matter how hard he fought against it. "Do you remember that night at the lounge?" Cadence asked quietly. Reef turned to glance at the dark building. He remembered his hands warm against her back. "You said there's probably some bar in Beijing, just like the one in Seattle?" Cadence went on. Reef closed his eyes against the blank display of his goggles. "Why did you do it?" There was a moment of silence before she answered. "I bet there's a place up here in Canada that's just like Seattle, except it's men and not women that there aren't enough of." Shasta's tiny voice sounded in the background. She was saying something about snow. "Why did you do it?" Reef asked again, barely getting the words out through his parched throat. "You didn't want me to have that visa. Why?" "I'm tired of being saved, Reef. I just wanted to get free." "Free of me?" Reef's heart felt made of paper. "Free of all of you." She cut off the channel. Reef sank down onto the sidewalk in front of the hotel. He searched for his alt program, and then remembered it wasn't there anymore. He downloaded it. There was nothing else to do. The bricks bulged in his pockets, and his jaw trembled while he thought about them. Alt finished downloading. Reef half-heartedly logged on, while he wondered where Ollie had gone after they'd split up. He couldn't remember saying goodbye. He tried him on the chat channel. "Ollie?" No answer. Alt's cityscape flickered to life around him, copper and crystal dulled by the smoggy mist. A holographic man in a leather vest stood near the corner of the hotel. "You going to tell me about the fated blade?" Reef grunted. The man bobbed his head as he had the last time Reef had seen him. But an unfamiliar digitized voice came out. 1 hour, 7 minutes, 27 seconds. Reef got to his feet. "What did you say?" 1 hour, 7 minutes, 22 seconds. The back of Reef's neck went hot with panic. Breck's words went through his head. It's not a real quest. Just the Chinese mocking us. Reef raked his hands through his hair, looked down the street as though he'd find someone there who could help him. You know the game is riddled with leeches, all waiting for their creator to say the word. Down goes all of our infrastructure. He opened the chat channel and hailed Ollie again. Reef! Listen, something bad's coming, something really bad. Get out of the sprawl. Head for Canada. Our infrastructure's going down. Maybe in the confusion you'll be able to get across. There was a crackle that might have been Ollie hitting the mic while tightening his goggles. You sure this isn't one of your big conspiracy theories? Just trust me. Get out. All right. I'm at the metro anyway. Wouldn't mind seeing Canada, even if it's just through the border fence. There was a pause, and then Ollie said, You coming too? Reef slid his hands into his pockets, curled his fingers around the edges of the bricks there. Just get out. Reef ended the call. He racked his brains for the username the alien had used to chat with him at the steam plant. 1 hour, 6 minutes, 41 seconds. The alien answered his hail. All that crap you told me about the fated blade, Reef said. Your people are going to help China attack us, aren't they? You're going to shut down the sprawl so we'll stop coming into your world. It took a long moment for the translation program to come back with the alien's answer. We're not helping the Chinese. Bullshit! I just heard the countdown. In an hour, all those leeches they planted are going to activate and overwhelm our infrastructure. And then what? Nuclear attack, too? I don't know anything about that. The fated blade. The stupid, impossible quest. It's not a quest at all. It's a countdown to a digital attack from Great China. I don't know anything about the quest. Or the countdown. Your wars have nothing to do with me. What I told you is true. Your people have become too dependent on my world. Reef was hardly listening. You're tired of us coming into your world and funneling out your money. You don't need us anymore now that you've got the solar energy you want. So you're going to wipe Seattle off the map. You do not understand. This is not about your war. The connection between our two worlds is harming both worlds in ways you do not yet know about. Ways which we have only recently discovered. Reef's breath went cold in his lungs. What are you talking about? You have joined your world to ours willingly, and we do not want to harm you. But it must end. Reef balled his fist against his forehead, struggling to understand what was going on. It didn't make sense. The alien was only going in circles. You want to destroy us, same as China does. We never wanted to harm... Reef grunted with impatience. Why are you telling me any of this? Because it cannot go on. We will separate. We must. Another long pause. Reef couldn't tell if it was because of the translation program or something else, but he thought the alien's voice sounded strained. And I want someone to admit. Anyone. I want you to admit that you would do the same thing if you were in our place. Do what? You're going to cut us off? It'll be chaos. Worldwide war. Our economies will collapse. Silence from the alien. You want to know if I would screw you over to save myself? Reef went on. An image came to his mind. Shasta, sleeping in her mother's arms. His throat constricted. Sorry. I'm not interested in easing your conscience. If you understood how the connection between our worlds is harming both... You want to know what it'll be like? Reef cut in. Stick around and see what happens to Seattle. See what happens when China sends a nuclear warhead to the sprawl. Take a look at the death and smoke and chaos, and then tell me you can keep your conscience clear while you screw us over. Reef cut the channel. He was shaking. Smoke and chaos. There was a better way to die. He could go back with the resin to his container and just float away. His goggles flashed. Ollie was hailing him. "Hey, are you coming?" Reef hesitated, didn't know how to answer. "You better hope there are at least a few leeches in Canada," Ollie said, "or I don't know what you're going to do with all your time." Reef peered down the dark street in the direction of his container. I don't think hunting leeches did much good in the end. It was as effective a way as any to annoy China. And me. Reef grinned in spite of himself. "Hey, we might need some money when we get across the border," Ollie said. "Got anything you want to sell?" Reef tightened his grip on the bricks of resin in his pockets. He thought about going back to his container, lifting into an electric blue sky, lost to gravity and to the world forever. "Reef?" Ollie said, a note of concern in his voice. Reef's tight grip on the bricks of resin was making his hands sweat. He let go. "Yeah, I do. I'll meet you at the station."
Five. When we ended it all. More than 100 years from now. Dylan. On the first day, you will tell your story. On the second, I will tell mine. On the third, one of us will die. You will choose who.
The first day. Quinn. My name is Quinn, and it's past time I came of age. Some of the girls in my band of kin have already married, even ones younger than me. But I've been busy with my special work. I only started a couple years ago, but I was meant for it. Something in my bones makes me forever restless. When I was little, I would turn over every seashell nestled in the rocks along the coast. "Like you forgot what you were looking for," Truly once told me, "and you'd remember once you found it." Now I know what I'm supposed to find, but I've no time left for searching. Like the other girls in my band, I must come of age. Where I live used to be called Canada, but isn't called anything anymore. When a land starts splitting into pieces, one name won't work. We live on the move between the great crevices to the north and east, and the ruined city to the south, setting up tents and tearing them down, traveling to sanctuaries in season. Coldest times, we live in the White Hall, a big block building with carved columns all around. We burn wood right there on the blackened floor and let the smoke go out through the high windows, while our eldest tells stories of the other place and the girl queen late into the night. Whitehall goes away before the cold ends, just vanishes like it was never there, and leaves behind a big sloping hill you could get buried under if you don't get out in time. So we go next to the library, where we have only a month to read before the whole building disappears, and the books with it. You can't burn anything there because you might send the papers up in flame, but we rip the soft layer from the floor and make blankets of it. Do you know, that soft stuff comes back every time the library does? But if you try to take it with you when the library disappears, the soft stuff vanishes too. Same with the books, although I don't mind when they go, because our eldest tells stories about the other place all year round. In burning season, when the trees catch fire in the heat, we take shelter in the high tower, which is a stacked-up building taller than trees and all covered in vines and crawling with creatures, mice and shrews and raccoons. The creatures come there to get away from the smoke and the heat from the trees on fire, like we do. High tower vanishes quick. You can't stay for more than a few weeks. If you were standing on one of the tallest stacks of the building when it disappeared, you would fall right to your death. which is what happened to Truly's mom when she went back for something she forgot. The last part of the burning season, we try to get to the coast, where it's cooler. There are sanctuaries that come and go much quicker than the high tower, like the room with medicines, which stays for maybe a day, and the place of soft seats, cushy chairs lined up in long rows under the trees, which you can only use for about half a day on your way to somewhere longer lasting. I used to think that the good sanctuaries were created by magic from the other place, in order to give us aid. Now I'm older, I understand different. The other place doesn't create sanctuaries out of nowhere. Our eldest says the sanctuaries are ghosts of our ruined past, come to haunt us as much as to save us. Some of the oldest ones will tell you that they remember a sanctuary, or one that their fathers had told them about, that isn't quite like the others, because when it vanishes, it takes you with it. It launches you not back into the past, but into the other place, into a land of plenty, always enough food, enough medicine, babies born all through the warm seasons and no one freezing in the cold. Sanctuaries that stay put, houses instead of tents, and nothing ever torn down. No need to move on to the next place. No need to war with another band over what you don't have enough of. This is the reason I have put off my coming of age until now. I must do my special work, which is to find this sanctuary some say doesn't exist. The transporting sanctuary. Once every few years we might travel down to the ruined city, to look for quarry if times are hard or we've missed an important sanctuary. But the ruined city has a bad air. I've never gone very close myself. From a long way off I can see all kinds of high towers that aren't sanctuaries but just old buildings stuck to the spot and probably ruled by hordes of rats. We only go there if we're desperate, because it's the lair of the evil mages, shadowy men who want only to destroy everything good. Times have happened that some kin who went into the city didn't come back out. That's what tells us the mages live there. That, and the foul look of the place. The mages are a plague to us, venturing out in secret from their lair and setting spells to work against us. Long ago they were banished from the other place, and they've been in a rage ever since. They know they can never get back there, so they plot to destroy it. In the meantime, they play spiteful tricks on anyone they think has it better than they do. It was like that once when Artak killed his first wild dog. We roasted it on the spit, but then, after we ate it, it appeared right back on the spit again. We said to ourselves it was magic from the other place helping us eat our fill, so we ate again, and again the meat appeared back on the spit. But this time we realized some trouble. We'd eaten the meat twice, but our stomachs felt emptier than ever. It was the evil mages. They were taking the meat from our stomachs and putting it back on the spit so we couldn't ever get full. We had to pack up camp and leave that place so the evil spell wouldn't spread to our other food. Sometimes the mages conjure up not sanctuaries with food all rotten, or with great machines that grind and scream. Once when I was out scraping bark for medicines, I saw a house appear like a beautiful dream, bright yellow with a peaked roof to let the rain and snow slide off. But when I went in through the door, I saw the back wall had been smashed in. There was so much rubble everywhere it was like someone had grabbed the house and shook it until everything was bits and pieces. There was something under the rubble, too, which I couldn't see but smelled rotten. I turned and went out of the house. I ran hard until the bright yellow was lost in the trees. No good magic would conjure a sanctuary like that. I told our eldest about the yellow dream house once I could bring myself to talk about it. That's when she told me that the evil mages liked to torment us with bad things from our past. I asked her what had happened to that yellow house in the past, why it was so terrible inside. Eldest thought for a while. Her gaze went narrow like it does when she's sorting the good dried berries from the spoiled ones. Her clothes were the only ones that hadn't gone to rags, since we always gave her the newest felt to wear, and I started to feel twisty nervous standing in front of her with my skirt in shreds.
How do you think the ruined city came to be?
she finally said. I had never imagined the city as anything else but what it was now, a terrible playland for angry mages. I started to tell Eldest that it must have been the mages who had created the city. Except in my heart, I knew that it hadn't been the mages. I knew from Eldest's hard stare, from the way her chin wobbled just before she turned away. Mages never create anything at all. They only conjure things that already exist from other places, or turn good things bad. It was the people, then. It might be difficult for you to imagine how people could smash up something as big as a city without any kind of magic. But I've seen a whole camp trampled and charred. I've seen the look in someone's eye when he means to kill, like there's nothing that can stop him from tearing the whole world apart. And long ago times, people made those great screaming machines the mages conjure in their not sanctuaries. Machines can do about as much as magic can, I'll bet. So it was people and their machines who ruined the Yellow Dream House, same as what happened to the ruined city. The evil mages probably sent the dream house to me to hurt me because they hate my special love for the other place. No one else has ever seen the Yellow House, only me, who loves the stories of Dylan and the Girl Queen and the beautiful land they live in, who has been visited by visions no one else has seen. When I was a young girl, I was once alone in the forest, gathering plants for medicines, when I caught a rare sight. A girl lifting up out of the ground as if out of water, her wet hair shining in the sun. Just for a moment she appeared, only one moment and then gone, vanished like a sanctuary. She was an avatar, a magical sighting sent to us from the past for shoring up our hearts. This avatar was the water nymph, a symbol of that which belongs to two worlds, water and land, our world and the other place. I am the only one who has seen her since the time our eldest saw her, as a young girl. When I went back to camp, our eldest told me that long ago times there had been a stream there where I had seen the water nymph avatar, but it had dried up like so many others and filled in with trees and dirt. She said my sighting of the nymph meant that I had one foot in the other place, just as I must have put one foot into that dried-up stream. Not long after that, we went on our way to the Cold House of Bounty Sanctuary, which is a metal room full of icy cold foods that sits on a wide gravel bank. It's one of the best sanctuaries, but also the hardest to get to. Not only do we have to pass over the mountain ridge, but we also have to be on the lookout for bands who don't want to share the bounty. We were tired and weary by the time we reached Cold House, but still we sought out the avatar that appears near there quite often, who we call the Exhorter. When she appears, she looks right through all of us with her piercing stare and says, "When you finish all of your homework, you can play 1 hour of Mario. Just 1 hour. Don't try to ask for more." Then she sits down and stares through our torsos. Just stares like she's watching to see what we'll do. And sometimes she'll move her wrist or give a snort of laughter, and then watch silently again. We children stand with our hands folded before us, contemplating her words. Finish your work and then play. It's the simplest of commandments and the hardest to follow. But this time when she said her words, it was different. It seemed to me she didn't look through everyone. She looked right into my eyes. And so I knew her words held a special meaning for me. Finish your work. Afterward, I told our eldest that I knew I had a special work ahead of me, because I had seen the water nymph that few others have seen, and because the exhorter had looked me right in the eye when she had exhorted. "What is your special work?" Eldest asked. I didn't know then, but I knew it had something to do with the other place, that land of beauty and magic that Dylan first found so long ago. I hardly ate the boxed foods at Cold House of Bounty, where we stayed for less than a day, and then ran off before another band might come through. I was skinny and weak when we went on to High Tower to shelter from a forest fire, but I climbed the steps to the tallest stack so I could be alone and think a while. I thought about the dream house, I thought about how evil could eat up beauty, and how that isn't the work of only mages. I thought about what I had seen once from a hiding place in the forest. The look in someone's eye like there was nothing that could stop him from tearing the whole world apart. The charred and trampled camp. After sunset that night in the high tower, the sky went on blazing through the night, orange-red above a distant line of yellow fire. In the morning, the sky would turn to ash and fall down on us soft as snow. But for now, the forest fire was beautiful against the gray and black sky. A world of trees was being eaten up by flames, and from a distance there was nothing terrible about it. I decided upon my work. I want to find the transporting sanctuary, I told our eldest. I thought she would say no, that it was a waste of time and no good reason to put off my coming of age, that I was too old to believe in stories of that fabled sanctuary. Instead, her eyes went small, as though her vision were sliding into the past. She nodded her trembling head. Why else might the water nymph have appeared to me, except for the special work of finding a doorway into such a world? I had gotten very good at going off on my own. I was used to searching for alder bark and shrub berries for my father, who made most of our medicines. So I went off in search of sanctuaries. I made a catalogue of the ones we visited and the ones other bands told us about, and the ones I found on my own. I kept track of all the avatars in case they might have any clues about how to find the transporting sanctuary. Our eldest tells us to pick a certain avatar to hold in our hearts, either for courage or for wisdom, or to model ourselves after. The boys all like the moribund, a man who appears near High Tower far too often, his skin black as he suffers through his death throes. Thankfully, he goes almost as quickly as he comes, so you only see him for a few seconds at a time. My best friend, Truly, used to prefer the melodious, a girl with a bright painted face who sings about a boy she shouldn't love. But when I try to sing the song to Truly now, she makes her much too old for that face and picks up her baby. I have my own avatar to think on. The water nymph. I would remember her when I was afraid, or just weary and hungry. Always when I was alone in the forest, I called her to mind. I kept up my work for years, until our eldest came to talk to me. Our band had welcomed so few babies in the past year, and fewer had survived the winter. A boy had asked about me, Artak, who I guess is a man now, since he survived the 10-day trek along the crevice. Really, he's no older than I am. Eldest told me it was well past time for my own coming of age, when I should travel along the crevice in search of some token to bring back to a husband. Times have happened girls have found bits of gold down in the crevice, revealed there where the earth opened up some generations ago. But Artak would take me even if I failed to find so much as a gold flake. My special work isn't finished, I told eldest. How will I search for sanctuaries when I have babies to take care of? Eldest kept her gaze trained over my head and told me, Your work will be for your band now. Artak smiled at me for the next 3 days. He was as nice as any of the other boys in our band. Still had all his teeth. No terrible scars or anything, though his hair had stopped growing along one patch over his ear where he'd been burned. We'd played together as kids. I knew he would treat me nice. But I'd seen his face set in hatred once over what another band had done. Raided our camp and taken all our food. A good enough reason to hate another band, I guess. I'd seen that look in his eye while I hid, like the whole world was his to tear down. The same as I'd seen on the face of every other man in my band that day, when they trampled the other band's camp and burned it to the ground. When they pulled down some of the men in the forest before they could get away and took home the women they could catch. I had seen what Artak had done to one of the women there in the trees. It will be different with me when I return to him. I suppose it will be different, because we're of the same band. My days of searching for the transporting sanctuary are over. I've traveled farther along the crevice than any of the others ever did when they came of age. I saw their old campfires along the way, the remains here and there of a shelter or bed. I've come this far in the hope of making up for being so late. Before I set off, our eldest gave me a warning. She told me some who have traveled along the crevice for their coming of age have found more than just gold rocks. I asked her what she meant, and she said that my special work might even now be ahead of me. "There's a rare chance," she said, "but I've been thinking for some time that this might be your real work. And I'm sorry if it is." It was possible, she told me, that I might meet someone on my journey, someone from the other place. Times have happened that young ones on their coming-of-age journey have encountered such ones, but they never speak about it. They come back and it's like they're closed in a cloud of their own air. Everything about them dims. They're quiet, sad. I thought to myself that eldest had that sort of look about her. Closed up, muffled in sadness. I always thought it was because she was so much older than any of the rest of us. But now I wonder. Eldest told me that if I should encounter one of the inhabitants of the other place, I would have a choice to make. "I can't tell you what that choice is," Eldest said to me. "All I can tell you is the choice is yours alone, and you are never to speak of it to anyone. But you must be careful. The evil mages are always on the prowl, hoping to find a way to destroy the other place. And they can take the disguise of nobler forms, true citizens of that magical land." "How do you know all of this if no one has ever spoken of it?" I asked. "How do you know I will be given some choice to make?" "Because I was one of those who met someone from the other place." The haze of summer heat went heavy around us, like it wanted to close me in her small, sad world. "I made my choice, and I have never been sure since then if it was the right choice to make."
The second day. Dylan. You have told your story, and now I will tell mine. I am Dylan of the famous tales, who first found the other place long ago. My first visit there was a tour of wonders. I feasted in the golden rooms of the elven palace, explored jewel-crusted caverns, steered a ship with dragon-winged sails to the misty islands. Every corner of the land holds some puzzle or prize. A ruby lodged in the heart of a ghostly tree, an elixir made from ancient salt dried on moonlit banks, a silver scepter held captive by a sphinx. It broke my heart to return home that first time. But the queen of the other place had given me a golden bracelet that would enable me to find her again, and so I soon went back. On my second trip to that realm, I brought my brother, Hunter. He loved the Golden Palace, the hidden treasures. He wished to win the girl queen's favor, so he vowed to rid her land of the evil mages who so often caused chaos there, draining magic from fairy coves, muddying crystal streams, and bringing sickness wherever they walked. First, Hunter and I ventured to the Sphinx's lair to win a silver scepter of great power. Then we chased the mages all the way to a distant place called the Wasted Wood, where we battled with them and finally used the magical silver scepter to banish them from the land. The longer we stayed in the other place, the more we loved it. Hunter loved the riches of the palace, the thrill of heroic quests. I loved the girl queen. We soon went home, but I couldn't help returning again and again. I would think of the girl queen and suddenly step right into the woods behind her palace. Then Hunter asked to return, and so I took him with me. But when he realized how many times I'd gone there without him, When he saw how the girl queen preferred my company and how I had learned the secrets to unlocking the land's hidden wonders, he grew bitter. He lost heart for our adventures and went home. But I loved the other place more than I loved my own world, and I chose to remain in the enchanted realm and never to leave. I made my home in the palace and every morning asked the queen how I could increase her happiness. Her younger brother became like my own brother and wrote tales of my adventures. I quested for treasure, recorded lore, passed judgments, made decrees. I forgot the world I had come from, and I was happy. Until I realized that some malaise had struck the other place. The malaise crept in so slowly I didn't notice for some time. How long had it been since I'd seen a forest clearing humming with magic? How long since the drone of fairy nests echoed from a flashing cove? The silver scepter itself lost its glow, and its rainbow array of jewels grew dim. No longer could I use it to keep fell creatures at bay. Trolls roamed farther from their dark lairs, mage crows from their desolate crags. I set off to survey the trouble, as far as the outlying lands. I was gone for months, documenting my findings. A black island had sprung up in a distant bay and turned the water foul. A terrible stench rose from crevices and caverns and poisoned streams and wells. Farmers reported sharp black spikes growing up through their fields. A terrified hunter returned from the forest to say that he had seen more spikes jutting up from the soil there. It seemed everyone and every place was affected, but none knew the cause. My mind worked endlessly but found no answers. After almost a year, I journeyed back toward the palace, sick and weary from my wanderings. The land turned bleaker. Even my carriage began to molder, the silk lining turning black and falling away at my touch. I stopped at meeting halls and taverns along the way, eager to learn what had befallen the land in my absence. I heard tales of trees growing brittle and shattering like ice, crops failing and food growing scarce. When I reached the palace, I saw a face that sent a shock to my spine, a face I had all but forgotten. I searched my mind for who that face might belong to. Could it be? My head filled with memories that had slipped away long ago. No, not slipped, that I had pushed away. As if I'd shoved them all down into some deep place and now they were crawling out again. Here at the palace was Hunter. "Brother," he cried and smiled at me. But in his eyes I saw the same bitterness that had driven him to leave the other place long ago. "You've forgotten about me," he said. "I had to find the way here on my own." He opened his palm to show me a tiny jewel, gone black with age or ruin. Then he reached for the gold bracelet on my wrist and turned it to expose the empty setting from which the jewel had fallen. "A breadcrumb," he said. "I found the jewel in our own land, and it led me here to you." Unease slid into my heart. I learned that Hunter had been here in the other place for some months, but had done nothing to combat the spreading miasma that covered all. I suppose there was nothing he could do, but it angered me to learn that he feasted while others starved, that he courted the queen's attention while the stench of death hung in the air. To him the other place was a game, a child's plaything. I don't think he believed it was all quite real. I busied myself in my work, testing out theories that had been offered by the sages in the outlying lands. I sent scouts into the crags to see if the mages had somehow returned, sent spies to watch the ice giants on the far side of the mountains. I applied balms to the sick, said spells over foul wells and withered crops. But the land continued to decline. One day I was visited by a sage I had once sought counsel from as a boy. He came to the palace and stood in the receiving room with his dark eyes like smoldering coals. His body so frail I feared the pounding echo of the fountains would knock him down. "You have known what the trouble is," he said to me. "You have known it since you returned from the outlying lands, but you will not face it." I assured him that I had no such knowledge. "If you know what plagues us, it is your duty to reveal it." "I do not know," the man said. I know only that it is something so terrible you will not let yourself discover it." I had him escorted away, thinking he had grown too old to know his mind any more. But what he said haunted me. Whenever I saw my brother's face, I felt the sage was right, but I couldn't understand why I should feel that way. I wanted above everything to discover what plagued the other place. Why should I not let myself discover it? My brother grew restless in the palace, impatient with the queen's agitation. I tried to make him understand what danger the realm was in, but he would not listen. I realized he had fallen into a deep disappointment, that he had returned to the other place in the hopes of finding ease and happiness, but that those things had eluded him. After the sage's visit, he became convinced that I could heal the land, but would not. "See how pale he has become?" Hunter told the queen. "How sickly? He grows worse as the realm does. It is some spell he has cast in order to drive me out." "I am only weary from searching for answers," I said. "There is a look about you of evil magic," Hunter said, and the queen admitted that it was true. Her suspicion stung me, but at last I had to admit to myself that the sickness I felt was more than exhaustion. I hardly ate any more, and a terrible pain throbbed in my arm. Something lay deep within the flesh there, something I had kept secret for a long time. Once, long ago, my brother and I had sought to rid the land of evil mages, as you will remember. We had chased the mages all the way to their camp in the wasted wood and done battle there. The mages were terrible men. Not even really quite men, but shadows of men, as you said, Quinn. They had turned the wood into a foul place. When Hunter and I had met the mages there in battle, we saw. The wood was full of terrible things. I'd all but forgotten, but now I remembered. Their dark magic had driven all the animals rabid, so that the creatures had gored the trees with tooth and claw, and the stench of rotting wood was thick in the air. The wood nymphs stalked us like we were quarry, and slavered for our blood, and we only eluded them by cutting down trolls and tossing them the carcasses. The putrid sap that covered all claimed our boots and cloaks, but at last we drove the mages from their dark hiding places and defeated them with the silver scepter's magic. Afterward, Hunter and I could barely crawl away. We made camp outside its boundaries, where I discovered that a fell creature no bigger than my hand had latched on to my pack. It was completely black but for a cluster of milky eyes, and covered all over in sharp bristles. We had lost our swords in the wood, and we could find nothing sharp enough to pierce its bristled hide to kill it. The sage I spoke of earlier had his warren nearby, and, seeing our fire, came to find out what we were doing in those parts where few ventured any more. We showed him the little bristle beast, and he told us what we must do. Return it to the wasted wood, where it would feed on the dark magic there until the wood was cleansed of it, and the beast died of starvation. No worse instructions could he have given to us. We dreaded returning to the wood, even with the mages banished, because of the terrible things that still lurked there. But we knew the task must be done, and so we started off, our steps heavy. On the way, more trouble befell us. The bristle beast pierced my arm with one of its bristles. I was so overcome with horror that Hunter promised he would finish our task on his own. I returned to our camp to nurse my wound, but the quill had sunk so deep into my flesh that I could not remove it. When Hunter returned the following night, I told him I had removed the quill. I could not bear for him to know that something fell still lay inside of me. We never spoke of it or the wood again. Now, years later, I knew I must travel back to the wasted wood. I left Hunter and the Queen at the palace and went to find out whether all of the dark magic had drained away, or if some vestige remained and managed to putrefy the whole land. I had only to come to the very outskirts of the wood to find my answer. The wood was as infected as it had been years ago. No dark magic had drained at all. This knowledge so sickened me that I lay in camp for days before going back to the palace. Even when I left the wood, I felt that some curse followed me, that I was tainted by dark magic. I told Hunter about the wasted wood, and he revealed the truth. He had meant to take the bristle beast to the wasted wood that day years ago, but as he had gotten closer to the wood, he had been so overcome with dread that he had dropped the beast into a deep cavern where he left it to starve. The source of the realm's sickness was now revealed. We couldn't find the cavern, so we assumed the earth had since closed over it, but it was clear what must have happened to the beast. It had fed not on the dark magic of the distant wood, but on the good magic of the land. The beast was growing so large on this diet that its black bristles had pierced the earth. The spikes reported by farmers and hunters were really the prickled brow of the beast jutting up from the soil. The black island in the poisoned bay was rumored to be the heel of the beast, pushing out from the soft silt of the bank. I realized that to kill the beast would be to collapse the whole of the other place. To let it live would be to watch it grow large enough to break free, and in doing so, destroy all. I called for the sage who gave an answer to my dilemma. A very old and almost forgotten type of magic must be used to petrify the beast. Turned to stone, it would no longer be able to feed on the magic of the land, nor would the beast collapse or decay underneath the land. Slowly, the magic would leak out of the petrified beast, back into the land, and all would be saved. There was a problem with this plan. The person who petrified the beast must have non-magical blood. Otherwise, the beast would defend itself by sucking all of the magic out of its attacker in an instant, killing the person and preventing the beast's petrification. In the whole of the other place, only Hunter and I had non-magical blood, so the task had to fall to one of us. I was ready to agree to this task when the sage revealed one thing more. The person who wields the spell would petrify not only the beast, but also himself. He would give his life for the other place. Still, I was willing. I loved the other place with all my heart and would do anything to save it. And yet I came to realize I did not have the strength to wield the spell. The bristle that had been lodged in my arm so long had slowly poisoned me so that I had almost died journeying to the wasted wood and back. I could not save the land that Hunter and I had doomed. Upon realizing this, Hunter fled the palace, never to be seen again. For him, the other place was only ever a dreamland, and he was not willing to give his life for it. I determined to find some other non-magical person to complete the task, but by this time I couldn't remember how I had first come to the land, or that I had once lived in a non-magical world. The sage revealed to me that there were other non-magical people in existence somewhere, people I had once known but had lost, though he didn't know where I could find them. I set off to search, with the fate of the other place growing ever more precarious. I wandered into your world. Now, I must see my task completed. Here, where the earth has opened, someone must cast the spell to petrify the beast and save the other place. Whoever is willing must be ready to give her life. If no one is willing, it will mean death to that magical land, and to the queen I love.
The third day. Dylan and Quinn. Quinn made up her mind. She knew what her choice would be. She was surprised to feel disappointment. Dylan, too, was surprised at how his heart sank when he saw Quinn coming back from her camp. The crevice where the earth had opened, revealing a swath of rock, either black or deepest red, was too terrible for him to look at straight on. In the corner of his vision, Dylan saw the molecules of the rock shifting and sliding into tangled knots. The juncture of two universes. He felt his own body weaken at the sight of it so that he could hardly keep on his feet. Quinn took the shining scepter from Dylan while he explained how to use it. He pressed himself against the mossy far wall of the crevice and gave her instructions for how to perform the spell that would petrify the bristle beast. The beast's flesh showed through the wall of the crevice, a wound open to the air. Quinn wondered why Dylan wouldn't look at it, why he squirmed now like an agitated animal. "Will you perform the spell?" Dylan asked, breathless and wincing. Quinn lifted the scepter, admired its smooth, silvery handle, the clear bulb of an eye at its tip. "You aren't who you say you are, Dylan." Quinn stood before him, brandishing the device he'd given her like a club, brandishing her vorpal, too. Here, near the juncture of the two universes, his vorpal was weaker than it had ever been, distracted by the ever-shifting molecules Quinn didn't seem to see. He felt her vorpal pressing at him, testing him. Could it be that his story hadn't worked after all? But then, why was she still here? Quinn hated to admit it. Dylan's story was a lie. No one had listened more closely to the Elder's stories about the other place than Quinn had. She knew them all, up to the point where Dylan and Hunter had found the bristle beast and had agreed to return it to the warped wood. She turned to find that Dylan had stopped his tortured squirming and was watching her, a faint line creasing his brow. "You made 3 mistakes in your story," Quinn said. Dylan's expression was all curiosity, not what Quinn had expected. Her conviction wavered for a moment. "First," she said, "the jewels on the silver scepter. You talked about a rainbow array, but everyone knows the silver scepter's power comes from a band of sapphires from the crystal waters of a fairy cove. Second, you called the lair of trolls and fell beasts the wasted wood, but I've always heard the place of trolls called the warped wood. Third, the way you described the bristle beast, the creature you hate so much that its image must be seared into your mind. You said its eyes were white, but the stories say they're as black as its body, that its one weak point is almost impossible to find." She held the scepter out in front of her as if it might offer some protection against whatever reaction Dylan might decide to have. He went on gaping at her. He was going soft at the edges like something dissolving in water. Dylan felt he might collapse at any moment, from relief or fear or exhaustion. She hadn't believed his story. Everyone believed his story. She lowered the scepter, dropped her stony expression. "I want you to be the real Dylan," she said. "I wanted this to be my special work." She nodded at the terrible face of the rock. "Now my only work will be to walk away, and cut Artak's meat and wash his pots and hope birthing his babies doesn't kill me." Dylan studied her. "Why didn't you go home last night?" he asked. "Why come here to face me if you knew I wasn't? If you thought I was a mage?" She squinted at him. "Are you a mage? You don't feel like what I thought a mage would feel like." Her vorpal probed at his. "But you're not Dylan, so I can't do what you want me to do. I know what my special work is now. To do nothing. To go back home." Her voice was heavy. Dylan leaned against a crumbling wall of rock. The red-black juncture in front of him left a sunspot on his eyelids when he closed them. "I'm not a mage, and my story wasn't a lie. Not exactly." He didn't expect her to believe him, but maybe that was a good thing. Maybe he didn't want her to believe him. When he opened his eyes again, here is what he saw. Not some poor, stupid native of a world that was lumbering into its last days, but a girl whose tattered felt skirt was still green with moss from the nest she had made for herself the night before, whose weary slouch told him she'd been awake for hours, weighing his concerns alongside her own. A girl he didn't want to hurt. Quinn knew she must walk away. And yet, Dylan wasn't a mage. He had some secret, but it wasn't that. Her vorpal felt his confusion and discomfort and sympathy. For her. That wasn't something mages felt, if she understood the stories. And now Quinn realized the real reason it had taken her all night to make her choice, when those 3 obvious mistakes should have made it for her. Despite the proof that Dylan was lying, Quinn believed his story. Dylan wished he knew what was going through Quinn's mind while she scrutinized the juncture in the rock. She finally turned back to him and asked, "Is there really a beast?" Dylan only looked at the red-black swath of rock and shuddered. Quinn charged up the scepter as Dylan had instructed her, and gasped when the top turned vibrant blue. Dylan's stomach lurched. "Turn that off!" He was clammy with panic. He couldn't let her do this. "I don't think you're the one who should wield the spell." She gazed at the crackling blue light, mesmerized. "Didn't you listen to the story?" he said. "I said you would die if you carried this out." She cocked her head and gave him a dark smile. Do mages always feel so guilty when their evil plans work? Dylan wanted to grab the device from her hand, but he couldn't manage to take more than a small step. Quinn moved toward the red-black glare in the rock, luring him. His body threatened to turn into a puddle of formless cells. The solid form he had taken was too difficult to keep together much longer. "Don't," he said, almost choking on the hot, dusty air. "It's you. The beast is you." Quinn froze. The device crackled in her hand. "It's you," Dylan said again. "It's your whole land." She blinked at him, confused. She finally lowered the device. "Canada?" "Your whole world. All of it. Your entire universe." She looked around at the moss-draped maples, frowned at the sight of a distant dust storm. Dylan wondered how much was in that library she'd mentioned, what she might have studied of cosmology. "Somehow our 2 universes got stuck together," he told her. "Yours has been pushing into ours for over a century now. It's wreaking havoc there." Her body was still rigid, her brow furrowed. "There's no bristle beast." Dylan looked away from her, and then back. "It's us, pushing through the other place," Quinn said. "Destroying it." She folded her arms around herself. She seemed to be shrinking. "It can't go on much longer," Dylan said. "Even your world is starting to come apart. You've seen the proof. The great crevices that have opened up. Other things." "What things?" He didn't want to tell her. He didn't want to ruin everything that gave her world meaning. "The sanctuaries. Those places that vanish and reappear." She shook her head. "Those places are brought to us from the past, to help us." "No! They come by accident." He couldn't stand the way her shoulders drooped when he said it. He wanted her to go on defying him, refusing to believe him. "Everything's getting pushed around. Pieces of the past are getting jumbled up with the present. It isn't magic, and it isn't mages. There are no mages. What you see is merely your own world coming apart." Her face was pale as death. Her jaw clenched tight as a vice. "And the avatars? Are those just an accident, too?" He was silent. "Tell me," she said. "The avatars are just people from the past," he admitted, "getting pushed around in time." "None of it is from the other place? It's not magic?" "Yes, it's all magic," he wanted to say. "All accidents are magic. The fact that you showed up here. The fact that it's me you met and not one of the others who were sent here. Your world is breaking apart.
like ours has been doing. It's going to get worse. I wouldn't be here otherwise. We didn't think it would be right to make you sever the connection between our worlds.
She unfolded her arms to study the scepter in her hand.
Look, the story I told you. It was as fair as I could tell it.
Dylan went on.
I said you would be giving up your life if you did this.
She fumbled to turn off the device but couldn't figure it out. Her hands were shaking too much to find the right pressure points.
It's only fair.
Dylan heard his voice coming out garbled and strained. He took a few steps back from the scarred rock face, as if that would help.
Your planet is going to pieces. You've bombed the whole place. Even if our worlds weren't stuck together the way they are, it's doubtful you could ever build everything back up. The ice caps aren't coming back, even though we've taken so much of your solar energy. Do you understand any of what I'm saying?
None of this was coming out right.
You let everything get so bad that there's no turning things around.
She finally found the right points. The blue light went out.
Our worlds have to be separated, or they'll smash each other apart, Dylan said.
Quinn said what he couldn't. And only one will survive. Quinn's skin went cold even as the heat of the late morning sun pounded the top of her head.
You don't have to do this,
Dylan said.
I told you we wouldn't make you.
Quinn's grip on the scepter slackened. Dylan lurched forward and caught it. He retreated with it back to the far side of the crevice, away from the wound in the rock wall behind her. So that's the decision I have to make? Quinn said, her mouth dry. If I save the other place, my own world dies?
But do you see? That's not even the decision. Your world is going to die anyway. It's a world beyond repair.
Quinn tried to understand what he was saying. A world beyond repair. The great crevices, the ruined city, the food shortages, the animals growing scarce, the summer fires and the unbearable heat. But that was what the sanctuaries were for, to help them in their need. Except, the sanctuaries were really another sign that her world was broken. What will happen to my world if no one cuts it away from yours? Quinn asked.
The same thing that's happening now. Your world will continue to die. Time will go to pieces. Perhaps something more. If you sever the connection, the same will happen. Only much, much quicker. At least, as far as anyone can guess.
Quinn's stomach turned. Her legs buckled in the heat, and then Dylan was at her side. He guided her to a shaded spot where a sapling grew out from a deep crack in the rock wall. Quinn lay back against the slope of rocks and grasses, heat pounding in her head.
I shouldn't have told you all that,
Dylan said.
I was only supposed to tell you the story. It was supposed to be a lot easier.
He gave her a glum look of apology. She glanced away. Do you know about the transporting sanctuary? She asked weakly.
I told you the sanctuaries.
I know. But is it true that there's a way we could get into the other place? Into your world?
You mean like an evacuation?
He chewed his lip.
We've thought about that. A long time ago, a lot of your people came into our world. We tried to make a place where they could live. But it doesn't work. Our atoms hold together more loosely than yours do. Your people can only stay for so long. And when we come here to your world, it's like holding our breath. It's like trying to live underwater. Neither of us is made to live in the other's universe.
Quinn heard him through a long tunnel. She thought she might be losing consciousness. For a moment she had the sensation of swimming in dark water, as though through an underwater cave. She imagined herself surfacing on the far end, breaking into sunlight like the water nymph, finding herself in another world, Dylan's world. His voice brought her back.
We've tried to work this out for over a century. We've tried to find some other solution.
His tone dipped low.
Our worlds are foreign to each other. They weren't ever meant to meet.
A hot spike of anger went through Quinn's chest. She lifted herself, weak as she was.
That's wrong. You're wrong. The other place is all I've loved ever since I was young. I saw the water nymph. I don't care what you say about the avatars. She came to me. Only me.
She knew I had a special work. Dylan didn't say anything. His eyes were round and startled.
The real Dylan wouldn't say those things, Quinn said. He was glad our worlds came together.
He didn't deny it.
Isn't any of your story true? Quinn said bitterly. Hunter going away and coming back. The sage trying to help you remember. Is it the same story for everyone who comes along the crevice and meets you? Different people have posed as Dylan. It isn't always me.
He bowed his head so she couldn't see his face.
But I use the same story. Every time.
She heard the heavy sadness in his voice. She'd told him things she'd never told anyone. She suddenly felt sorry for him. Sorry they were both locked in this awful nightmare. They were sitting now almost facing away from each other, both hunched over as if to protect twin wounds. He only wants to be away from me, she thought. Away from here. She felt the same way. She'd only ever wanted to be left alone to do her work. But now she couldn't for a moment think what had been so bad about that idea of going back to her band, visiting the sanctuaries in turn, setting up the tents and tearing them down, having children with Artak. Panic clawed in her belly. She could have found a way to go on searching for the transporting sanctuary with her children at her heels, rambling through the forest together. What was so bad about that? Why had she thought marrying would be so bad? Instead, she had her special work. To kill one world for the sake of the other. She took a great, shuddering breath. I can't do it, she said.
I know.
He stood and gently took her hand. He pulled her up and led her away from the terrible red wound in the rock. They retreated to a copse of pale trees. Dylan sat on a soft carpet of leaves and moss and studied the scepter. It was supposed to repel the matter of his own world, push it away from the heavy tangles of matter that made up Quinn's universe. It would close up the wound in his own universe and leave the wound in hers gaping open. There was no other way to do it. No other way that his people had found. He turned his gaze to Quinn. Her knees were huddled to her chest, eyes trained on some distant sight. Was she thinking about all of the avatars who had spoken to her? The sanctuaries she'd catalogued? Maybe she was only looking at the tangle of moss and trees in the distance. Dylan wished he were back in his own world, soaking up heat and energy. But he was beyond that point. No amount of energy would save him now. He breathed in warm air that seemed to leak right back out of his lungs into his loosening form. Quinn looked at the scepter Dylan was holding. You're too weak to use the scepter. Is that why you want me to do it? You can't do it yourself?
It's not exactly true that I'm too weak to do it on my own,
Dylan said.
It's just that my people, we can't quite bring ourselves to do it.
He struggled to find a way to explain.
There was a time when we felt we could. When we felt we must destroy your world to save ours. But then there was a great war between your countries, and it was terrible to watch the suffering that destruction brought on your people. We knew it would be the same if the connection between the worlds is severed. Only worse. Your whole world would be destroyed.
Dylan remembered the avatar she had told him about. The moribund. He hoped the man wasn't really experiencing his own death over and over again, that it was only that Quinn's people were getting a glimpse of him through some window in time. He closed his eyes for a long moment, trying to erase the thought altogether.
After that, my people decided that we couldn't bring that destruction on you. Dylan went on. And when we make a decision together, it's very hard to undo. Our Vorpals echo the decision back to us. That kind of resolve can keep a hold on us for generations. But now your world is suffering anyway. It's coming to pieces the way my world is. We can't let things go on the way they are. But we can't bring ourselves to destroy you. We can only hope that you will choose to sacrifice your world for ours.
But the story you told me, Quinn said. You said I would die if I saved the other place. But you didn't say that my whole world would die.
We're getting desperate.
He turned away. It's not right, Quinn said. You should have told me the truth to start with. Dylan laid the device between his feet. It looked harmless in the leaf litter.
You want to know the truth? My world isn't some enchanted realm. We let you believe it was so that you wouldn't stop us from taking your energy. So you wouldn't look for a way to cut yourselves free from us. We made sure that we would be the ones with the power in the end.
He could see in Quinn's searching gaze that she was deciding whether to believe him. He grew weaker under her hard stare.
That's the truth I should have told you from the start, he said feebly.
Quinn crossed her arms. You said that once you got people from my world to go into your world.
It's not a sanctuary that does it.
The transporting sanctuary.
There's no such thing. It's just... some people are special. They can see the other place. Can walk right into it.
I've never heard of that happening.
You have to be in the right place. Even if you're special, you have to come far enough south, here, to where the two worlds overlap.
Quinn drew herself up. So if someone from my band, someone special, came here and walked into the other place with this device... Dylan's stomach went hard as rock. That person could cut the other place away from this world. Quinn went on. This world would be the one to survive. Wouldn't it? Dylan studied the hard planes of her face. He nodded. So the real question, Quinn said quietly, is save the other place, or save my own land?
No. Save the other place or save a dying land. That's the choice.
But still, it's my choice. Somewhere above them a bird warbled in answer. Dylan himself had nothing to say. He had already told Quinn at the beginning of this, you will choose. Quinn got to her feet. Her legs trembled. I don't want either world to die. I only ever wanted to find a way to the other place. I thought if I could find it, then maybe things wouldn't be so hard for my band. Dylan's heart thudded. She was leaving. He'd known she wouldn't go through with this. Still, he wasn't ready for her to leave. She turned and took heavy steps in the direction of her camp. A bolt of alarm went through Dylan's heart. Wait! She looked back. Dylan could feel whole parts of him shutting down, overstressed by exposure to the juncture. It was all he could do to hold together a semi-solid form. Will you stay with me? For just a little while? Quinn stood frozen for a moment. Dylan felt sure she would turn and walk away without saying another word. But she took hesitant steps back to where he sat.
It's just that you're the first person I've seen in weeks,"
he explained. Her expression softened.
"I usually don't mind being alone,"
Dylan said.
"but there's something different about you."
He couldn't say it out loud. She tucked her hair behind her ears, and he saw again how earnest she was, how she always thought so carefully about what she should do. He regretted ever trying to trick her. He hadn't thought he had it in himself to feel so deeply about anything anymore. But he felt such deep regret that if he looked down, he might find he had worn a hole right through himself. Quinn kneeled and touched the device lightly, as if afraid to wake it. "What would have happened to you if I had used this? Would you have been trapped here, or could you go back?"
"I can't go back either way."
He cleared his throat. He'd left his water at his camp.
I'm not going to last much longer. I've been exposed to the juncture too many times. For too long."
Quinn squinted against the sun reflecting off the far rock face. Her lips parted as though she was about to say something, but instead a rush of air escaped. Dylan wondered how there could be any room in her heart right now for sympathy.
"It's all right,"
he told her.
"Really. I volunteered for this. I knew what would happen."
She turned toward him with a questioning gaze.
"I thought I might as well,"
he continued.
"I haven't been the same anyway. Since something happened."
He shook his head. He couldn't bring himself to say it. Maple flowers were spilling out of her skirt pocket. The petals were half crushed. They lent a sweet smell to the air. Dylan leaned closer to her. "I would have liked to have gone to your world," she said. Dylan imagined himself showing her great glass buildings like she had never seen, high towers with all their windows still in place, whole cities whirring with life.
"Yes, I think you would have."
"It's not all ruined yet? Breaking apart?"
"Some parts of it are. But other parts, cities in the mountains that move with the snowdrifts, crystal sea caves like windows that look into water."
He broke off again. More things he didn't want to think about. He couldn't go back home. Already, he felt his insides giving up, shutting down. "Is there a palace?" Quinn asked. He supposed there was. Plenty of them. He nodded. "And the girl queen?"
"There's a queen. She's not a girl. She's grown. She's not the same person from the stories, really."
Quinn touched his arm. "Don't tell me about the water nymph. I'm going to think of her however I want." She closed her eyes. The streaks of dirt on her face looked like misplaced shadows. "Do you really have a brother?"
"I have an older brother who's a bit like Hunter. We didn't always get along."
A hot prickle went down Dylan's neck.
"When I think about it, it's like being in that warped wood."
Quinn opened her eyes. "It's okay. You don't have to tell me more. I've been to a place a lot like those woods. I know what kinds of things happen there." Some hard knot inside Dylan's chest loosened. Quinn's hand rested on his arm, and it might have been the only part of him that wasn't trying to dissolve. "Do you really think our two worlds were never meant to come together?" she asked, her voice so low he could barely hear her. "I can't bring myself to believe that my world was never supposed to be this way. I can't believe the water nymph wasn't meant for me." Dylan looked up at the birds skittering through the canopy of leaves.
"Our worlds have changed each other in terrible ways."
"Not all terrible," Quinn said. He supposed she meant the sanctuaries and the avatars, mistakes though they were. He cared only about her arm against his, the smell of maple flowers, the shifting sunlight that made her eyes flash copper.
No, not all terrible.
She looked at him, surprised. She must have heard in his voice what he meant. She gave him a sad smile. The funny thing is, I always just wanted to be left alone.
So did I.
A dark memory of his brother threatened to overwhelm him. He pushed it away.
People change you.
Dylan's body felt weighed down, with exhaustion, with a sad sort of weariness. He lay back against a tangle of roots and moss.
I'm tired,
he said.
You should probably go now. You have a long walk ahead.
No, I'll stay a little longer. She moved her hand into his. Little lines of worry appeared around her eyes.
Are you going to bring your band here?
He asked.
Find someone who can cross into the other place and use the scepter. You can still save yourselves that way.
I don't care about that just now, she said. I care about what's happening to you. Isn't there some way I can help you? He shook his head.
What will you tell your band when you go back to them?
He asked. I'll tell them I met someone from the other place.
Say it was a dark mage. He felt dizzy.
He thought he would float away if she didn't keep hold of his hand.
The darkest. And he told you terrible things.
I'll say it was Dylan, and that he finally came home to his own world.
To the world he ruined.
He closed his eyes. He hardly knew what he was saying. Exhaustion threatened to overtake him.
He started all of this. The real Dylan. Drew us all together, and now we've screwed each other up. We might have been okay if we had walked away much sooner. We could have gone back to how we were before we got stuck together.
He felt Quinn shift in the dirt next to him. You're wrong, you know, she said. People don't change you. They can't, because you're never just one thing to begin with.
They do. They do terrible things, and you go to pieces. You can't be put together again.
She brushed a hand over his forehead, light as a falling leaf. That's what people are. Just all different pieces. Quinn imagined the tall spikes of the bristle beast coming up through the dirt, felt herself speared. The smell of decay kept coming back to her, coupled with the memory of running from the yellow dream house. The soft sound of Dylan's breathing drew Quinn's attention. His sleeping form had sunk into the leaf litter. Sunk too far. Quinn couldn't tell where his back ended and the ground began. All of his lines and shapes had gone blurry. He was like a water nymph, half in, half out of the world. He was like something being consumed. Quinn was like something being invaded. Her entire world filled up all the space inside of her. The ruffled lakes, the shadows of moss on trees, the white unspooling rivers trailing like veils over mountain ridges, truly gathering up the howling baby, Artak at the fire, the yawning crevices, the charred camp. She tried to picture it all going to pieces. Once Quinn had seen her band set fire to another band's camp. She imagined it now as the forest fire she had once watched from the high tower, red and orange and soft gray, eating and eating at the world. Destruction wasn't the work of mages. Dylan awoke when he heard Quinn's soft footfalls coming back to him. She jostled him as she lay down again. He felt the cool smoothness of the device in her hand. He tried to slide it out of her grip and found that he was no longer solid enough to do so. The scepter tumbled into the leaves. Quinn's hand melded into his, pushing right through his loosely held cells. He found he didn't mind. Quinn severed the connection between the worlds. She chose death for her own. Her work was done. She trembled on the cool blanket of leaves, still holding Dylan's hand. His words rang in her ears. Your world will continue to die. Time will go to pieces. If you sever the connection, it will happen much, much quicker. She thought, maybe life will narrow down to a single moment. It could be a moment like the moribund, a pinpoint of agony. Or it could be something lovely, like pulling out of the water into the sunlight. She listened to the leaves rustle in a warm breeze, the only voice on the air. Another sound among the trees. She raised herself up to look, and saw the oddest sight. A young boy was moving through the woods, confusion lining his face. And here was a young girl coming to meet him, the sun in her hair. Quinn shivered with surprise. She sat frozen, watching. It's them, she said in awe. The girl queen. And Dylan. The real Dylan. Time will go to pieces. It's the moment they first met, she said. It was like seeing an avatar, someone brought from the past. Already they were vanishing, like all the other avatars vanished, sliding back into the time from which they'd come. But Quinn had seen them. A magical sighting, sent from the past. Or no, a sign of a world going to pieces. And it was only chance that it had been young Dylan and the girl queen she had seen. An accident. But maybe some accidents were magic. Maybe some people were meant to find each other. Quinn huddled closer to Dylan, and he stirred. I wish people could know about the end, she said. His agitation made the air around them ripple. About how I lied? How your world will die? No. I wish they could know about the two of us, she went on, turning to face him. She couldn't feel his hand anymore. He was as loose as a cloud, but all of his molecules seemed to be reaching. And how one world saved the other. He and Quinn were both reaching now, lifting away with time and heat and air, like water into sunlight. This concludes the reading of Where Futures End by Parker Peevyhouse. Copyright 2016 by Parker Peevyhouse. This book was read by Katie Coster, Caitlin Davies, Emily Wu Zeller, Will Dameron, and Andrew Iden. This unabridged audiobook was recorded by arrangement with Kathy Dawson Books, an imprint of Penguin Publishing Group, a division of Penguin Random House LLC, and was produced in 2016 by Blackstone Audio Inc., which holds the copyright. Neither this recording nor any portion of it may be reproduced or used for any purpose without prior written authorization from Blackstone Audio Inc. If you would like to obtain a monthly update telling you about new releases, call 1-800-SAY-BOOK. That's 1-800-729-2665. For a complete listing of our titles, visit our website at www.downpour.com. Thank you.